But I used to see this phenomenon when we used to go to medical meetings and we'd have this big table, and obviously the consultants are all sitting at the table, but there was plenty of chairs at the table for the whole team to sit at the table. But what would happen is when the residents came into this room, they would take the chairs from the table and kind of place them on the back wall and kind of like distance themselves from the table as if they didn't belong at the table. But what you see time and again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I really think about this, my lived experience would be the resident or registrar, whoever it is, that goes and sits at the table with the consultant is on the top of mind for the job. They are the person that is making themselves known, saying hello, standing right in front of the consultant.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Becc is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Kristeen is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Kristeen and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today's episode is going to be on a made-up word called pedestaling. So Kristeen and I touched on this in an earlier episode, and we actually, after talking about it, we thought this is actually a really important concept in itself that we'd love to bring to you. And I don't think I've ever heard about this spoken ever on the internet. However, well, the reason is because it's like a subtle negative concept, isn't it, Kristeen? It's quite insidious. It's one of those things that, really bubbly, lovely, kind, generous, warm, thoughtful people do. We commonly do this in our lives as a part of wanting to be a nice person. And it is a lovely thing to do at its core. But in this episode, we really want to bring the costs of this pedestaling to you. And Kristeen and I have been brainstorming a little bit how this has shown up in our life, and we are not shy of being fangirls to particularly many women in our life. I am a fangirl to many women in my life. Same with you, right, Kristeen?
Oh my goodness. And I can think of two in particular. And I think, I've definitely outed myself as a fangirl to them, but one of them is Professor Michelle Leach over at Monash University. So anyone who's actually met Michelle Leach will totally understand this. But I put her on such a pedestal, and I try not to, because she's, like, I've worked with her before and things like that, and I've got to keep my cool. But I really noticed this last year when I asked her to come and be part of one of my programs. And it took such a lot of courage to ask her to do anything for me because she's on this pedestal. But also, it was the actual emotion of it when she said yes. It was honestly like I just invited Taylor Swift to my house and she was coming over. Like, it was that, like, that much of a win. That's how much I love her. And the other one would be Lila Rotstein, who I still have the privilege of working with at the Alfred. So they're like my absolute heroes, my med-ed heroes. And they're just these beautiful, inspiring women who just create these beautiful spaces and just have such an impact on everyone they come into contact with, including me. So I fangirl on them all the time. But I think as nice as that is, and it might be nice for them to hear this, but I think it does create an awkward imbalance when you tell someone that you admire them that much, that you got them on a pedestal. And that was part of the reason that we wanted to talk about this, because it's double-edged. So when you pedestal someone, not only are you separating yourself from them in a way that might have a negative impact on you, you're also creating a dynamic where they might not feel like they can easily step into a more collaborative mode with you because you're creating this separation. So it's kind of about what you're doing to yourself when you pedestal and to them when you pedestal someone. So I cannot wait to get into this topic with you, Becc. And do you have any examples from your life?
You know, as you were just talking, actually, I was thinking the people I fangirl the most are my clients. And this would probably seem very counterintuitive to my clients because, as a part of the coaching work I do, my clients, by design, reveal the most ugly thoughts in their mind, like the worst things they could think of, they could say, and the things that they're struggling with, and you know, all the things that you would never want to tell another person, and that would you would think would make you fall off that pedestal, right? But I think this is probably because I spend so much time behind the scenes in the minds of these brilliant, successful women, that it's just not surprising to me anymore that they have these kinds of thoughts. And to me, it's even more, it just builds in me this want to put these people up on a pedestal and be like, it's so brilliant. Like, you have all these thoughts and these emotions, these challenges and these experiences, and still, and simply, this is how, not simply at all, and this is how you choose to navigate them and deal with them and show up. It only makes the temptation greater for me to put these on a pedestal. And actually, as their coach, I have to very purposefully not do that, because, as you're saying, it creates a dynamic. If I were to pedestal them, it creates a dynamic that doesn't help them. Most importantly, it doesn't help me be the best coach that I am, and it doesn't help them either if we allow these effects of putting somebody on a pedestal to infiltrate this relationship. So actually, that's somewhere that I didn't realize I'm actually very careful to switch off or turn down the dial of that mindset, because I'm aware of the downsides of pedestaling. But let me tell you a story from back when I was in med school. And this was the time that I think pedestaling created the most devastating results in my life. And I don't even know, because as a result of me putting this person on a pedestal, I missed out on an opportunity that I don't even know how it could have affected me in wonderful ways. So the person who I put on the pedestal in this case was the head of our medical school. And she was on this pedestal for many reasons, but the thing that like sweeps back into my memory now, I should say her name, Kim Bruni. She was the head of our school at the time, and she was the epitome of leadership to me. I remember us going through multiple different crises during our medical school time, and there were gasps and whispers and meetings and things that we'd all have to come to. And every time I'd think, oh my goodness, how is she going to handle this? How is she going to make this okay, make us okay? What decision is she going to make here? And just time after time, she would show up in these situations and not only make decisions that felt so well calculated and fair, but one of the most striking things to me was always her delivery, the way that she would stand in front of us and address us. It was the most queen-like, queen-like, I want to say performance, but it wasn't a performance. It was just how she was. It was just how she moved around the world, with poise and dignity and intelligence, despite the crises that were happening around her that all of us depended on her to solve for us. So in so many ways, I admired her. They're just a couple of the first things that come to my mind. But I had the greatest compliment I could have received from this person whom I put on this pedestal. And she called me into her office one day. It was my final year of med school, and we all had to write an essay, something to do with humanity in medicine. That wouldn't have been the topic name, but it was something non-clinical about medicine that we had to write about. And I decided to write about compassion in medicine, which might feel reasonably overdone, but my twist was the opposite of probably what you would expect me to talk about with compassion in medicine. I suspect you would expect me to say, we need more compassion in medicine. Doctors should be more compassionate to patients and to each other. But actually, I wrote quite the opposite. I wrote about how, and I can't actually remember the details of this essay now, but I wrote something along the lines of how it's actually unreasonable in so many ways to expect doctors to be compassionate in medicine, given our circumstances. And I spoke about the difference between empathy and compassion and sympathy and so on, and sort of built my argument as to why we're really asking too much of doctors in this scenario, and perhaps we should be doing more to support doctors to hopefully have the situation where they could be more compassionate on top of all the things that they do. And I was so flattered when she asked me to her office and she said, this needs to go in a journal. And honestly, this was the biggest compliment I could ever get from my lifetime. Like, throughout anything else I've ever done in my life, to have her pull me into her office and say, this is good enough to be in a journal. I'd never ever published anything in my life. I have no medical family to who had come before me to understand that, you know, publishing something in a journal is actually quite commonplace, or you could even say it's part and parcel with becoming a doctor. But I thought this was the most amazing compliment in the world, and it still is. But she said it just needs a few more references to be able to fit the structure of a journal. So I went away and excitedly continued to research. And my 2,000 word essay or 1,000 word essay turned into a 2,000 word essay, which turned into a 5,000 word essay, a 10,000 word essay. And I think I was nudging 12 to 15,000 words. So with this endless research I was doing, I was digging this hole for myself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and losing my direction and my opinion along the way. And so many times I would, on the weekends, take that pile of papers and that I was reading and take them to the cafe, and I'd sit down and read them. I'd rework and I'd cut things down. And eventually I left the essay. Eventually it became more than I could possibly work with to cut down, double-digit 1,000 words to 1,000. And there were lots of things at play here, perfectionism included. But what I wanted to bring to you guys today was, at no point during that time, during those weeks where I was going down the research rabbit hole and spiraling with unmade decisions and undecided direction, did I go to this person and say, could you give me a hand? Or could you give me an opinion? What do you think I should do? At no point did I go and ask her for anything. And this was very specifically by design. I purposely didn't approach her because I'd put her on this pedestal where she was too important, too brilliant, and too busy to have any time at all for any of my questions or queries. And on another hand, for me to show her that I didn't know what I was doing, this is in my mind what it meant, I didn't know what I was doing, or that I had a question or I couldn't make a decision, for me to show that to her, this person whom I had up on this pedestal, to me would have been the worst thing in the world. I might as well have never done the essay or attempted anything in the first place if I was going to lessen her opinion of me, or worse, burden her with this opportunity that she'd given me. And this is the negative side of pedestaling somebody. And as Christine alluded to in the first place, there is the negative side of being the person up on the pedestal, because my thoughts, I don't even know if I don't reckon I was particularly conscious of these thoughts in my head about having her on the pedestal and about these ideas that she'd be burdened by my questions or she'd think less of me. They're not things that I consciously believed about this woman. They're not things that I actually really thought she would think of me. But that was essentially what I was thinking of her in putting her on this pedestal, in creating this gap between her and me. When instead I suspect that the opposite was probably true. Actually, I think she would have been more than happy to help me, delighted to help me. In fact, it's kind of the job that she signed up to do as head of the school. And as I was saying, she does it so brilliantly and beautifully in all these challenges. It's what she does so well. She helps people in crises. And also, certainly, she wouldn't have thought less of me because I'd asked a question or was struggling with a decision or was finding this challenging. That's not how she would have actually thought about me. She doesn't have those fragile opinions about what makes somebody excellent or not. Again, these are the negative sides of putting somebody up on a pedestal.
Oh, it's such a great example. And what comes to mind for me is when you describe this woman as having a kind of a queen energy, like it sounds like she had queen energy, which is what you probably have it now, to be honest, but maybe at that time you were aspiring to have queen energy. And she's brought you in, having seen all this potential in you and seen this different perspective. And you can see now how you writing an article like that is very true north for you, right? What you do now, that is, oh my goodness, I'm sure she saw all of you that you couldn't even see yet, right? And so she's got queen energy. And she's using that to lift you up and empower you as a young, maybe a mini version of herself, or just someone that she knows has this infinite potential. And so I think that is a beautiful dynamic. But like what you're saying is she wouldn't have had any negative opinion of you if you had sought her help. But also people with queen energy would be able to say with love, oh, actually, I have a lot on my plate right now. I can't commit a lot of time to this. But here's someone that can help you, or why don't you do this and then get in touch with me in a few weeks or whatever. Like people who have that kind of energy, they are good at managing themselves and their time. So you're not going to be in their way. You're not going to be a burden because they simply are too brilliant to allow it, right? It's like, it's not a thing. But you don't really know that when you're like pedestaling them and doing the thing that you're doing, right? So it's funny now to think of it on the other side. And I think one of the places that I see this, obviously, a lot of people who are listening are doctors in training, but even if you're not a doctor in training and you're sort of a grown-up doctor at the end of your training, a lot of things that come up as an issue for us where there is this pedestal problem is when you're hoping to get a job, employment, right? So the people that you're going to ask for jobs, they're often on these pedestals. And something that I've seen quite a lot around the hospital, and it was especially apparent before COVID. So a lot of the meetings and things are online now. But I used to see this phenomenon when we used to go to medical meetings and we'd have this big table, and obviously the consultants are all sitting at the table, but there was plenty of chairs at the table for the whole team to sit at the table. But what would happen is when the residents came into this room, they would take the chairs from the table and kind of place them on the back wall and kind of like distance themselves from the table as if they didn't belong at the table. And I used to say to them, guys, there's plenty of room at the table. Like it was easier to see things from the table. And they would actually politely decline my invitation to sit at the table. And I thought it was so strange. But in another way, it wasn't strange. It was very normal behavior because I would have been the exact same as a resident, because you almost think that, if you sit at the table where the consultants are, that you've got the potential to be in the way. What if someone asked you to move? That would be devastating, right? But what you see time and again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I really think about this, my lived experience would be The resident or registrar, whoever it is, that goes and sits at the table with the consultants is on the top of mind for the job. They are the person that is making themselves known, saying hello, standing right in front of the consultant. They're actually more likely to make an impression. So whilst, and I've been so guilty of this in the past, you're trying not to make a bad impression, you're trying not to be in the way, when really you're making no impression at all. And you're just on this wallflower, like somewhere in the background. And I don't want to be in the background. Well, sometimes I do, but when you're trying to get a job, you don't want to be in the background, like when someone else is in the foreground, right? So I think that's another time where this pedestaling issue can stop us from taking a seat at the table of life and prohibit opportunities.
The assumptions you can easily make, probably not consciously, but subconsciously, about the person who sits at the back of the room versus the person who sits at the table. Who has more initiative? The person who sits at the table or the person who sits at the back of the room? Like, if you had to pick one of them, who would you say has more initiative? Who has more interest? The person who sits at the table or the person who sits at the back of the room? It's obvious, right? And that's the concern about what the results of me pedestaling for that essay as well. It could have easily looked like I had no initiative and no interest, because I never returned to her office after that. You could have easily interpreted, that pedestaling that I was doing, well, the result of the pedestaling, the silence that I was creating, as a lack of initiative and interest, when actually the opposite was true. I had so much interest that I was buffing out to my 15,000 words. I couldn't be more interested. I couldn't be more enthusiastic. And this is really what we're trying to say here, that it is, as much as this is one of those things that might come from a really beautiful place, to have such wonderful thoughts about people that you want to elevate them like that. And also, we really want you to look at the whole picture of how that actually affects the way that you show up in the presence of, or with any opportunity related to somebody that you put on a pedestal. I'm so glad that Kristeen has the insight and the being so mission driven that she would ask these people who she has on pedestals to be a part of her program. Whether it's because she has the insight to recognize that the pedestaling doesn't make this person untouchable. I can hold this person as being absolutely brilliant and completely worthy of every ounce of admiration my nervous system can ooze out of me. And also, they're not separate. I don't need to separate myself from them. To be able to recognize that those two things can work together. I can admire this person and they don't need to be elevated up on a pedestal. We can walk together. We can sit together at the table. But it's also, as you said, and I know you've actually been on the other side of pedestaling to yourself, with people doing this to you in your life, again, in the most loving, complimentary way. But would you just be able to talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be somebody who has been pedestaled by another person with all of the best intentions, but for you as somebody who you're truly a teacher at heart and you love collaborating, you love connecting, can you just talk to us a little bit about what the experience is like being the one put on the pedestal, and can you talk about the negative side of it in particular for us?
Oh, you really put me on the spot. So it's so funny because I agree with you. I have had those experiences, and I think you will have also had those experiences as well. But it's funny because when it happens and someone says something and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I've been pedestaled. I'm always on like, oh God mode. I'm like, oh God, like, because then I'm like, oh no, this person is going to be very disappointed somehow when I let the authenticity out, which is going to happen in 3, 2, 1 seconds, right? Because I can't be keeping the authenticity in. So I have this instant kind of like, oh God moment where I'm like, great, you're about to be, grounded and disappointed. Maybe not, maybe not. So I guess it's probably from that experience of knowing that about myself. It gives me permission to try and be authentic all the time, so that I'm just like all the airs and graces are out the way and I don't have to be someone else, because it's a lot of pressure to try and be someone else and not to disappoint people. So I think that's kind of one of the main thing. But also, it whenever it happens to me, I never feel, I know why I do it to other people, but if it's happening to me, I never really feel like it's justified, because in my head I'm like, oh no, like it's just, oh no, like you're you and I'm me, and we can have a conversation and we don't have to put these weird energies into it. It's bizarre. So I think it does, it I guess it probably doesn't create blocks for me in as much as I think I would still be able to mentor that person and look after that person and create a bridge, because I guess probably after a few minutes they realize that I'm probably not on the pedestal anymore. They've seen the real me and they're like, oh well. But I guess in all seriousness, I think I'm quite keen to deconstruct that pedestal in the moment. I almost like let them see what I see in them and help them to see that I'm excited to be with them on whatever the situation is, whether they're a trainee or med student or whatever the situation is, um, because I think it's important that they don't pedestal me, I guess is how I feel about it. And equally, I should learn that about others. Because even coming back to Michelle Leach or Lila, who I definitely still pedestal, I can't seem to help it, but they would be beautiful mentors to me. Like, I'm sure that if they were to talk about me, they'd probably see me in that kind of way, where Michelle Leach definitely did mentor me. I worked with her over at Monash University and I learned so much from that experience. And she really, she just saw potential in me and she really nurtured it out. And there's so many techniques that I use in my own platform now because of that mentorship. But I think letting that mentorship in is part of the issue. Like if you are pedestaling someone, it makes it harder for them to mentor you. Like, so what I was thinking about when you were telling me your story, I was thinking, I hope that this person you're talking about listens to this podcast to close the loop for you. And I also hope that you take the 15,000 word thing and make it into a book, because I feel like we need to hear it, right? And I feel like that person would also say something similar to you. I almost think it would be so fun for you to send her this podcast. Will you do that, Becc? That would be, and then feedback. Can we do that? Can someone who's listening do that? That would be a total vibe. Anyway, I digress. But I think the person who's on the pedestal probably has, you've probably got a connection. You've probably got a resonance, and you know that somehow there's a commonality there. There's something about their energy or what they're doing that you both have in common. Usually, you're not going to pedestal someone you don't relate to, right? Like there's plenty of people who are in positions of power that I'm not going to put on a pedestal because they might not be the right vibe for me. So you're going to pedestal people who resonate with you for whatever reason, and it's probably going to be quite mutual. It's like a click. Do you agree?
I just love what you said about building a bridge. And it's like the bridge to connect you. As you're saying, it's all like you're connecting with somebody. It starts with this admiration, but what you want from the admiration and what your brain and body, what your nervous system is asking you to do is connect with this person. It's like this person is someone who you want to be more like. And ironically, instead of building a bridge between you, you put them up on a pedestal and you make them further away from you. But as you said, if you recognize that what you want is to be more like them, you recognize that the best way to do that is to connect with them, share space with them at least, but ideally some authentic words, share your thoughts, have conversations. That bridge that you're talking about is what you want to do. And like it, the beautiful thing about the bridge analogy that you brought up is you can still have somebody up on that pedestal. You can still elevate them. And I don't know if we can ever really pack that part of ourselves away that does that. And I get so much joy out of that too. I love being in that fangirl space where I'm just like, oh, this person's They're just like this beaming light of hope in the world, and it's inspiration. It feels so wonderful. And also you can elevate them just like what you do, but then you build the bridge. You keep the communication paths open. Do the opposite of what I did back then with all of my other perfectionism and things that were going on, where I destroyed the bridge. And she was trying to build a bridge for me. She was like, hey, let me give you a hand, let me lift you up. And I just cut off communication lines. But build the bridge instead. Build it out of whatever you need to, in whatever way you want to. But as much as it might feel scary, it's one of those things that it's like when you tinker on fear and excitement, it's just like let it lean into excitement, let it be a bridge that maybe is like a little bit rickety and it's not quite well established, but let it be exciting rather than fearful, because there's nothing more powerful than teaming up with somebody that you admire, and therefore becoming more of what you admire and learning more about, as you're saying, about how they're actually a human just like you. And that's not in a self-deprecating way. That's in an inspiring way. It's actually, like I was saying about my clients, I love hearing about all of the things that they struggle with and that challenge them, not because I'm a sadist, but because it's so impressive and inspirational to me to see how they navigate this. Nobody gets to do a life that doesn't have these things. But the people who are really successful and the people who I really admire, they take these challenges, they take these hard things, and they skillfully navigate them. And that's why you've got to build that bridge and learn how these people navigate the ups and downs of life. They're not just this queen on a pedestal who has no problems and has all like the people of the village sort their problems. That's not who they are. They're a normal human just like you, and you have so much to learn from them if you just build the bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just get this lovely vision of this kind of domino effect, because every single person listening, so you are listening with this in your ears. I just want you to be aware that you will be pedestaled by someone at some point. So you might think that you've got your pedestal humans, but actually someone will be pedestaling you at some point along the way. They might be doing it right now. So you would see this even on like the intern pedestals, the registrar, almost, they don't have to know much about you. They've just decided that's you. You're on, you're on the pedestal. So you have to be aware that as you walk around the world, this is just happening and you can't help it. But what I think is so beautiful is like the beautiful passing on of, I guess, whatever the mission is. Like the people that we look up to, Becc, are often doing something. They're leaders, right? Like who you've described and who I've described. They're leading in this beautiful way that we would aspire to lead. And so therefore they're having a sort of a domino effect where I'm sure you're not the only person who's pedestaled this person, who admires this person, and we're all kind of passing on the vibe. We're kind of building a tribe as we go through life, and we're having impact on people as we go through life. And so I think it's just kind of it's a beautiful dynamic to be aware of on both sides. If you're being pedestaled, how you can lift that other person up and make them feel comfortable and get the best out of them and send them on their way. And then there's this other part where if you are pedestaling someone, then just allowing yourself, like Becc says, to build that bridge and sort of meet them where they are. And I guess it's just, if it's top of mind, it can be this really beautiful dynamic. It could be a real fast track for personal growth and development.
That is such a beautiful place to finish. Let's finish there. But I just want to say one more thing, because I do not want this to be misused in the way that I see a lot of brilliant people misuse it. And that is, don't be self-deprecating to build that bridge. If you're the one being pedestaled, show this person that you are another brilliant person just like them, not by making yourself smaller, but by showing them how you're also a human just like them. Don't talk yourself down. Don't make yourself less. Don't dismiss the beautiful, wonderful things that they see in you. Why don't you just trust that their opinion, even if it's about you, might actually be right? Maybe they see things in you. So be careful when you build that bridge as a mentor to also demonstrate the level of self-value and self-worth, which is very different to arrogance that you would hope for someone like them to see in themselves. So let's be very careful to make sure this process is just lifting everybody, and nobody needs to be lowered or made less to meet anybody else. We're all just humans here. So guys, thank you so much for listening. That's something oozing out of you, Kristeen.
Oh my goodness, I love that so much. Thank you so much, Becc, and thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in